Okay, here's the book, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're going in alphabetical order. The next one is Rudolf Flesch. He lived from 1911 to about 1986. He wrote a book called Why Johnny Can't Read, and he was a big proponent of the phonics method of teaching reading. It's so much better where you sound out the letters and the words, and kids learn how to read very well. They use this new look-say method, and it's terrible, and that it causes dyslexia. They know it causes dyslexia. The public schools do not want to help children. They want to make things worse for the kids. You know the whole story about how it's based on the Prussian system to turn them into, cannon fodder, robots, conformists, lightweights, atheists, promiscuous, dilettantes, okay? It's not in their interest, and a whole bunch worse than that. I'm not going to go into that too much more because we talked about it before, but they want the kids to be dyslexic and functional illiterate so they're less likely to read and educate themselves. And that happened to a lot of people. And as a matter of fact, it happened to my older brother. My older brother had dyslexia and he had a lot of trouble reading. He couldn't really read well until he was in college because right around then is when the spell checker computers came out, and then he did really well. He actually became a pretty famous lawyer and he wrote a couple of books. He's a smart guy. But when he was growing up, I'm just intuiting this because there was a weird dynamic with my parents. My older brother, for example, me and the younger kids had to answer to my father. Okay, and if we misbehaved, man, we would get whipped. There was nothing ambiguous about it. And I actually think it's okay for parents to spank their children. You should never hurt a child, but I think, kids need to have discipline and behave. The parents should never hurt them, but for a kid to get spanked, it's not a big deal. Their butt's not made out of glass. And all these modern so-called child experts, they destroy children, okay? Back in the good old days, I saw nice families, and man, if I got out of line, my mother would whip me with the belt. I kind of considered it a big joke, though, I would run into my bedroom, get into the corner of my room, single bed, twin bed, and I would pick up my blanket. So my mom would try to whip me. She'd try to get the buckle to go around the corner of the blanket. Then I would throw the blanket over her head. Then I would run out of the room, lock myself in the bathroom until she calmed down. But I thought it was real funny. Then the next day I had school, I'd tell all my friends about how my mom tried to whip me, and I threw a towel, the bed sheet over her head, or my dad, same thing. I thought it was kind of funny. My father was more calm than my mom because, father was a pretty strong guy. He was like a former college boxer, okay? You don't want to piss him off. But anyways, be that as it may, so that's one of the things I learned from my brother. So because of that, my father wasn't really in charge of my brother. I think my mom said, you stay away from him, I'll be in charge of him. I think it's because my brother couldn't read and my dad had a hard time handling that. My dad was a very literate, bookish type of guy. My brother was really good looking and tall too. Because I knew, if I never bring a girlfriend, let her see him until after I slept with her or I didn't want her. Because as soon as she see my brother, she'd go, your brother is so gorgeous. The girls were in love with my brothers. Both of my brothers were a lot better looking than I was. Anyways, let's see. So that was a good book, Why Johnny Can't Read. Okay, here's a good quote from Rudolf Flesch. Creative thinking simply means realizing that there's no particular virtue in doing things the way they've always been done. And the schools teach the opposite. They teach, you must go by the book. You must obey the book. Okay, here's what I was getting at, is that the situation with school teachers is very much like the situation with doctors. Doctors want to help their patients. They just don't know what to do. And school teachers want to help their kids, but they don't know what to do. They just follow the lesson plan. They're not bright enough to come up with their own way to do it. And even if they do come up with their own way to do it and they're good, then they end up like John Taylor Gatto and they try to fire the guy and they hassle the guy, okay? He's well worth reading if you want to read about education. John Taylor Gatto, he wrote several good books. He's got some good YouTube videos too about education. Okay, so anyways, real thinking and teaching is you teach a person how to think for themselves, think independently, how to be skeptical. An intelligent person is skeptical because there's so much BS in the world, of course. Okay, Jean de La Fontaine, a French writer and poet in the 1700s. He says, no favor can win gratitude from a cat. That's kind of like how I felt with my wife. I give her this magnificent house with a pool, with a tennis court, with two major basketball courts. What more could you want? She was still always mad. I would have built an extension out of the house for her. I wanted to keep the family together. There was nothing I could do to make it work because she didn't want it to work. Everyone else wanted it to work. The kids, me. Every editor of a newspaper pays tribute to the devil. And it kind of seems like quite often some really, really rich person buys a newspaper or some other big media outlet, and then they just want to propagate their view, and so they don't care about the truth. And that's why so many of the biggest information outlets are the worst ones, because they're just propagating their agenda of some billionaire, and they don't care about the truth or the pros. Okay, his next quote, I bend but I do not break. I mean, you could look at that in two ways. And basically, yeah, there's some stuff you just have to do, but in your mind's eye, keep your own personal thoughts. Don't become a chump. Don't believe the crap, even though you're forced to obey it or accept it sometimes. Jean de La Fontaine, everyone believes easily, whatever they fear or whatever they desire. Okay, there's some truth in that. In everything, one must consider the end. That's a good piece of advice. What's the long-term game? What's the long-term game? So like when you're young and you want to get educated, the school's not going to educate you. If you want to get educated, you got to do it on your own. You got to read a lot. If you're young and you can get away with it and you're in a public school, I would ditch as much as possible and study on your own, because they're never going to teach you anything useful in a public school. That's just a fact. Okay, Fontaine, all the brains of the world are powerless against whatever sort of stupidity is in fashion. Yeah, it's kind of like the party is always right. Political correctness, it's always right. You're like forced to obey it no matter how ridiculous and destructive it is, because there's always 10, 15 jerks about ready to beat you up if you don't obey it, even though you know it's a pile of crap. So, that's why another reason why it's good to avoid crowds as much as you can, because endless crap that's forced upon you. Okay, whoever is a wolf will act like a wolf. That is most certain. And I've seen that to be true. If a person behaves bad towards other people, sooner or later they're probably going to behave bad towards you. So the smart move is probably to avoid that person. Don't get involved with them if you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't. Okay, let's see if Jean de La Fontaine has anything else for us today. Okay, that's it for Jean de La Fontaine. We got just a couple quotes real quick from Ann Ford, and we'll call it a day. Okay, Ann Ford says, the world men inhabit is rather bleak. It is a world full of doubt and confusion, where vulnerability must be hidden and not shared, where competition, not cooperation, is the order of the day, where men sacrifice the possibility of knowing their own children and sharing in their upbringing for the sake of a job which they may have chosen by chance, which may not suit them, and which in many cases dominates their lives to the exclusion of much else. Yeah, I think that's commonly the case, that women like to complain about men, but women don't want the life of a man. Men tend to have it much harder in life. Our country currently went through this craziness about feminization, and it basically hates men, okay? They get totally screwed over in divorce court. And I've seen funny things like women saying, you've probably seen these videos, saying, men get preferential treatment in comedian work. And then they try dressing as a man and being comedian, and it doesn't go so well. Guys, just inherently are funnier than women. And I think it's because we like women a lot more than they do. We try to show off in front of them. We try to entertain them. We try to make them laugh. They don't even have to say a word. We're just attracted to them, okay? So they don't have to be clever or funny or have a good story or an interesting adventure to talk about. They just have to be there. Okay, so they don't have to try so hard. Man has to try to have something, and I kind of see that like when you walk around, your place of work. The guy's been in his cubicle all day. He gets out in the hallway. He's looking for a friend, somebody to talk to. He's lonely. He's bored, okay? Whereas a woman's thinking, she's premenopausal. She got kids. I got to get home. I ain't going to talk to no nice guy loser wasting my time. So she's staring at her phone, doesn't want to talk to anybody. Whereas the guy, wants to share whatever joke or story he has for the day. So he's always trying to attract. So men are very much in the habit of just goofing around, and they also do a lot of manual labor, kind of boring stuff, or play sports together. And there's constant, let's say you're traveling. We sometimes would travel in a bus for 10 hours. So we're all telling jokes in the bus and stories. Men are much more like that. Women, not that I understand women that well, but they also get offended a lot faster than men do. Like, you can't call a woman stupid or all these other names, or she'll get mad, or she won't like you or think you're a jerk. Whereas with a guy, you call your friend stupid, idiot, you swear at him. That's how you talk. That's a sign of friendship, that you can tease and insult, and it doesn't matter because it's a game, because you're friends. You can't tease or insult a stranger. Anyways, I think it's a lot harder. There was a very funny lady, psychiatrist by the name of Esther Villar, and she wrote a book, I think it was called The Manipulated Man. I'll get to that later, but it's very funny when people see the life of man, where society hates you, no one's ever going to do anything nice for you, nobody wants to sleep with you. Oh, I saw something funny recently about cell phones. It says cell phones cause celibacy, because the number of men who are virgins, let's say by the age of, I think it was like by the age of 30 or something, used to be 8%, now it's like 27%, because they're creating like a harem-like effect. High status males can more quickly contact a bunch of females, and have 5 women versus regular guy who doesn't have those social skills, who doesn't stand out in a crowd, will like never get a woman. Some guys will never sleep with a woman in their life other than a prostitute or something. Not good. She had one last quote. There are no plain women on television. Well, there are nowadays. There didn't used to be. But anyways, that's the quotes for today.